Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Andrew's Stratalities with the Red Pill Religion project with a friend of mine, Albrecht, and we're doing something that we wanted to stream about for a long time, but finally got a chance to on this Saturday evening, which is Tomboys, and tomboys in media and real life, and how they can fit into traditionalism, because there's a lot of debate, at least in the world of masculine um, traditionalists or male traditionalists on tomboys. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Albrecht.
Ich bin Albrecht von Storen. Or should I say in Japanese,
Sure.
Tamaiwa Albrecht von Storen des.
Very impressive. Um, we've been friends online for a bit, and we're both single men, and we both tend to like women that are sort of tomboyish. So, why do you like tomboys, Albrecht?
With me, it's because I discovered that tomboys, for the longest time, I used to think that tomboys are lesbians until I discovered anime and then I realized, perhaps tomboys are not lesbians. That most of them are straight.
Yeah, and for those of us who aren't familiar with the term or the culture, a tomboy is just typically a girl or a young woman who's interested in more masculine pursuits, or tends to be full of energy in a way that's more typical of boys than girls. Um, and that's exactly right. That they men a lot of men tend to like tomboys because they're women who have an appreciation for male interests and for men, and they often have male playmates um, as well. And that's exactly right. The issue, at least in the modern world, is oftentimes they're assumed to be lesbians or not interested in men. But that wasn't always the case, and that's basically partially due to the gender confusion we have in the modern world. Wouldn't you say so?
That is true. And in my country, in the country where I come from, when you say tomboy, everyone always thinks it's a lesbian,
Hmm.
which is weird because majority of tomboys lean straight because LGBT distribution in the population tends to be quite low, even in areas where LGBT ideology is extremely strong and dominant, like in the US or Britain.
Yeah, that's right. Typically, the most well-controlled surveys show like 1 to 2 to maybe 3% of the population identifying as gay, which is a very small percentage. Um, and that's right. That most women who have masculine interests of some sort uh, tend to like um, men, and oftentimes women. Such women will get a lot of male attention because they are women with common interests that are typically masculine. So, being the only girl at the at the comic book store will get a lot of interest and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are some of your depictions of tomboys that you've seen in anime, and what are some of the tropes?
Forte stolen from the Galaxy Angel visual novel in anime is a she's extremely her interests are quite masculine in that she likes guns. Although in the visual novel she gets more nuance in that she's actually fleshed out as a character rather than stereotype. Another character that I've seen in fiction that is a massive tomboy would have to be Furiyoko from what's the name of the manga again? I have Tonari no Furisan ga Tonikaku Kawaii. Essentially, the girl looks like a delinquent and a tomboy when in reality she isn't.
Yeah, and that's also a common trope, is this sort of My Fair Lady thing of a tomboy discovering how to gussy herself up or to act more feminine, oftentimes to either pursue or attract a male protagonist, and
Yes.
that's a typical trope as well. Um,
Kira from Ruby exemplifies that trope at times.
can go ahead? Can you elaborate on that?
Like, we all know Pyrrha is a strong, mighty female warrior, when in reality, she's also a girl. There's this I think it's in season 2, where she goes to the dance with Jean and she's wearing a dress.
Yeah, another example of this is Starbuck from the new Battlestar Galactica series, and there's a scene in a subplot where she is pursuing a romance with Apollo, um, and ends up wearing a dress to like a dance or something, and he sort of
Yep.
stares agape at her because she looks so different than she does in her masculine uniform.
Marika from Isekoi, sorry, there's this character I forget from Nisekoi who has the whole thing. Like, at first she looks like a guy, or sorry, she dresses up as a guy and then realize early that she's actually a girl and that she binds her chest. The girl's name is Seishiro Tsugumi,
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
and a lot of people actually assume that
You're really breaking Albrecht. You might want to let things buffer. I'm not getting
boy
any
named
audio. Sorry.
So I was saying there's this girl in Nisekoi by the name of Seishiro Tsugumi. You first think it's a guy because the way she dresses in a masculine manner, and her chest is bound. But as the series progresses, we realize that it's a girl, and she actually does not look like a guy. Because I got cut off earlier.
No worries. We can work around the technical issues.
So yeah,
Yeah, and that's a sort of a common trope as well. And I'm more familiar with young adult fiction aimed at men, but one common trope is a tomboy or woman who hides as a man, who develops sort of a friendship with like the protagonist or her love interest, and things progress into a romance after it's discovered that she's a woman, which is
yep,
very classic, and typically I'd say it sort of fulfills this tendency or fantasy of men who, if they've had female childhood friends, especially if they go from pre-adolescence to adolescence and through puberty, that they tend to sort of develop romantic feelings, or at least the potential for it. And that tends to be a very strangely masculine romantic um, trope, as far as I can tell,
yeah.
of becoming attracted to a childhood friend or your best friend who happens to be a woman, and turning that friendship into a romance. Um, so, what are your thoughts on how?
Tomu-chan wa Oru,
Oh, go ahead.
what from the manga Tomu-chan pretty much exemplifies that to a T.
Yeah, exactly.
So what were you asking?
Sure. I was asking, what are your thoughts on how do tomboys fit into traditionalism and traditional gender roles?
That's a thing that I've always wanted to explore because For the longest time, I have seen traditionalists and reactionaries go on and on about how it should be femininity, not feminism, and that how girly girls are superior women to tomboys and lesbians.
Right.
I
Go ahead.
I find it really weird because number one, girly girls are flawed. Like they have flaws like everybody else. Over idealizing them pretty much covers up their flaws.
Yeah, that's true. I would also say that if you look at the roles that women have taken in more traditional societies, um, there's a tendency for women to take things that we in the West consider masculine, and part of the confusion I think is taking this sort of ideal of a Victorian housewife or a Victorian wife who is sort of unathletic, ineffective, just sort of arranges flowers all days, and consider that feminine, rather than a woman who is a partner in life and does has athleticism both inside and potentially outside of the home. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Even in more traditional societies, like in the countryside, women also do work. They're not running around. They're not sitting around all day waiting for some guy to show up.
yeah,
Like women in the countryside, they do farm work.
yeah, that's right. And if you look at hunter-gatherer societies, women actually hunt, and typically actually hunt more items of game than men do. So they'll hunt
Yeah.
rabbits and stuff like that. The other thing that people forget is, it's something we should cultivate again, is one of the primary ways of men and women to recreate together is dance, and women and men both require athleticism to dance, and that's sort of an example of how a girl can how tomboyishness can sort of combine sort of this outlier thing with a more feminine thing.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, is tomboys when they become adults often are very good mothers to active children, and that's sort of the thing too. Is that there needs to be that connection between multiple ways of interacting with people.
That's true. And now, because of the sexual revolution, everyone thinks that the only interaction between men and women should be in between the sheets.
Yeah, that's a tendency, and we also get confused at it, and we no longer have a clear procedure for progressing in those romantic and sexual relationships. Um, and so it spills into work and other social life and so on and so forth.
No wonder the line between porn and reality is getting blurred.
Yeah, and that's really bad because we're desecrating sacred things and uh, basically becoming confused on what's what. So, what do you think, Albrecht, is a good definition of a tomboy?
From what I've seen, it's a woman who is able to do traditionally masculine activities,
Yeah,
such
so.
as
Mhm.
hunting or playing video games or going to the gym. That being said, I do think that women should be free to do these things, much like with how women should be free to run around and pursue housework, for example.
Yeah, the other thing is, and this is a point that I like to emphasize, is if the traditionalists are right and men and women on average are different, then you don't really need to enforce gender norms, they'll just naturally occur. Um,
Yeah.
and that's sort of the key thing. And one of the concerns I have with how we're treating gender in the modern world is that girls who are tomboys or being encouraged to transition their gender rather than just have a few masculine interests or be a tomboy. Um, and then the other thing is typically tomboys tend to become more feminine after, of course, they hit puberty. Um, but
True.
which is fine. I mean, they still have sort of stereotypical masculine interests, but
Yeah. In the case of tomboys, I do think that feminism ruined both the girly girl and the tomboy because the feminists co-opted girly girls and told them that if they want to be sexually liberated, they have to sleep around with multiple men. For tomboys, it's the same thing but with multiple women instead. This is why there's a confusion between tomboy and lesbian.
yeah, that's right. And that's there's all sorts of other issues too with with that, and it's sort of frustrating that one cannot have differing interests without it people questioning your sexuality or who you're attracted to. Um,
Yep. Another issue would have to be the e-girl phenomenon where back in the 90s when video games started gaining social acceptance, girls naturally went in. The problem, of course, is that as time went on, there are women who realize that if they can capitalize on the male attention because of how rare they are. So, what some of them did was decide to cultivate the following from men and become the e girl. Twitch is essentially e girl central at this point.
yeah, and by e-girl you mean basically um, a female celebrity in a sort of masculine area of interest who
Yep,
who succeeds by sex appeal, right?
yep.
Uh,
They're fake tomboys.
yeah, they actually um, that's right. That's they fulfill that sort of perfect tomboy trope, right, of a beautiful girl who's interested in the same thing that a man is.
And now, look at them. They're destroying the idea of a woman playing video games because a lot of the female gamer types, they don't like these e-girls. They just want to play video games and not have to deal with men who stalk them just because they're girls. I know it's a bit of a stereotype, but this does happen.
Oh yeah, definitely, and that's a sort of a problem in the modern world, right? And I suspect it's a problem in other traditional cultures as well. Is there's a certain percentage of men that are, let's call it, romantically incompetent,
Yeah,
who will harass women rather than approach them in a socially understood way and accept rejection readily or in a reasonable way. And this is why in traditional societies you have things like balls and um, women being escorted by a male family member and or a female family member and so on and so forth, and highly regulating the interaction between the sexes uh, to be conducive to positive social interactions.
and then in Christianity, you also have the churches actually promoting social interactions.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what typically would happen is there would be interactions at churches, and you have all the elders of the community in both official and unofficial capacity to make sure everyone behaves appropriately.
Now it's just gone because, yeah, you still have dance, but now it's just at the bar.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah,
the
exactly.
less I say about it, the better. That's the most I can say about this. Because when you go to a bar, all you need to do is get drunk and then grind on the first person that you find attractive. That's it.
Yeah, and that's already always existed, but it's sort of expanded into how everyone, well, or not everyone, but that's how people think of the dances and stuff. And uh, turning it back to Tomboys, I mean, um, that was sort of the appeal, and I would say that even Jane Austen's main characters oftentimes were either tomboys or athletic women who sort of were somewhat atypical in that, but but very appealing to the male characters, of course. Um, and it's just something that we have to cultivate is how to allow people to uh, meet members of the opposite sex in a safe and way that's conducive to creating fulfilling relationships.
I do think that in Japanese fiction, tomboys are pretty much decently written because at least the Japanese understand what a tomboy is. In
Mm-hmm.
the West, that used to be the case, especially with shows like Ruby. But as time goes on, the idea of a tomboy is slowly dying out in American fiction because of all the woke feminist stupidity. Like, for example, Yang used to be this very attractive tomboyish girl. Now, because of the writers being woke, they decided to turn her into a discount lesbian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually a key point. And you're right, in a lot of Japanese anime, and this is sort of an interesting cultural point. Uh, the wives of samurai were expected to command and defend their estates when their samurais were off fighting battle, and so the ideal samurai um, wife would be like a tomboy who actually knew a little bit of martial arts and could command people and mount a defense. And
And she's also very literate.
yeah, exactly. And of course beautiful too, and so on and so forth, and be able to do this tea ceremony thing and all sorts of stuff. Um, and
Wait, Yamato Nadeshiko is a tomboy?
yeah, exactly.
Oh, sweet.
And America used to have that too, and that's sort of what a prairie girl was, or a frontier girl was a very athletic, hardworking woman who had some sort of male interests, and as a child would like um, capture fish or turtles or what have you.
Isn't that Daisy Duke from Dukes of Hazzard?
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, exactly. And
Sweet.
see, Tomboy is a male fantasy. Um, and I guess that's what maybe that if I'm being very charitable to those girly girl traditionalists, they're trying to say that girly girls need love too, which I can.
Yeah, they do.
They do. Yeah.
I mean, in the Philippines, we have the Maria Clara stereotype of a woman who is extremely demure.
Yeah. Exactly.
Although one thing I've always wondered is that Filipino fiction does not have, or we almost never have a tomboy archetype.
Hmm.
Like that's very rare, even in old media.
Yeah. And it might be a cultural thing that only exists in places like Japan, or America, or it might be more emphasized in those places.
All the one thing I noticed that here in the Philippines, a lot of books about romance, they only have girly girls. They don't have tomboys, unless if it's a lesbian,
Hmm.
which is extremely pathetic because it's uncreative.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you could have your lesbian tomboys. You could also have your lesbian girly girls if you want to do the whole LGBT stuff. Alternatively, if you want something more heterosexual, you could also have a tomboyish love interest and be done with it.
Yeah. And that's sort of the interesting thing is there's this conflation between interests in sexuality. Um, I guess the we should probably start reaching some conclusions here, but I guess the key things that we're emphasizing are that masculine interests don't shouldn't be tied to or interest shouldn't be tied to your sexual attraction.
Yeah,
And
although there's one thing I'm wondering though.
go ahead.
How would this counter feminism? Because one of the common arguments I heard for feminism is that if you support a tomboy, you support feminism.
Well, the problem with feminism is that it's a conflation of many different things, and it's sort of this Mott and Bailey thing where the the I forget which is which, but the bait is to say, well, if you like tomboys, you're supporting feminism, and then when you say okay, and then they're like, no, all what you really have to do is you have to um, uh, grant women these additional privileges and support these alternative sexualities and so on and so forth. And so that's the issue is that the key things that they push for are beyond just um, creating a society where being a tomboy is an acceptable expression.
Yeah, even in pre-feminist societies, you actually had them, like what you said with the Japanese, or in some cases, even the Koreans.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and if you look at the Middle Ages or even medieval Europe, you see things like Joan of Arc or female blacksmiths or Queen Elizabeth. Um,
Or Queen Isabella if you're Catholic.
yeah, exactly. And the tomboys are rare, or women taking masculine roles are rare, but not unheard of. And
Another would have to be Maria Theresa of Austria.
yeah, exactly.
The funny thing about her is that her father had no sons, and he was going around Europe telling them to accept Maria Theresa as his heiress.
Hmm.
Of course, this is a problem for Hungary because in Hungary a woman cannot rule.
Hmm.
So the whole thing that happened was she was asking the Hungarians for help holding her son in her arm, and the Hungarians say, "All hail Maria Theresa, our king!"
That's pretty funny. It reminds me of there was a pharaoh in Egypt who was a woman, but she wore the crown and everything for the pharaoh included
Hatshepsut.
a synthetic beard, and so she was a woman that had this regalia with a synthetic beard on it.
I think Queen Elizabeth II also has some male titles, like she is the Lord of Man.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think about it, how can a woman be the Lord of Man? You have the manliest island in the world, ruled by a woman, and it's called a Lord.
Yep.
She's also the Duke of Normandy.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, how can you be a Duke? You're a woman. Shouldn't you be the Duchess?
Yes, or either the Duchess or yeah.
I swear to God, this is too funny sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that feminism's biggest weakness would have to be it's not the anti feminists, it's that there are women who reject feminism's premises.
Yeah, that's right. And what I would say is in basically all of the West and in most primarily Christian countries, there's nothing more for feminism to do, even if it needed to do anything to begin with.
Yeah. Although, in my opinion, I mean, the thing that makes trads and reactionaries go for girly girl is that they were the first to reject feminism. Like, feminism says, oh, you're a slave if you're a housewife. And then you have these trad girls going, yeah, I'm a girly girl and a housewife.
Yeah,
Deal with it.
yeah,
And
that's
now
right.
I do think it's high time for tomboys to do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I challenge all the tomboys who are trads to do this. Be a tomboy and, and reject feminism.
Yeah, I think that's
That's
a
so
wonderful way to end the stream. So you can be a tomboy and a traditionalist woman, and yeah. All right. Good night, everyone, and we
good
will
night.
chat with you later.
Later.